All right. I feel like I can get rocking and rolling. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Jean. I'm a field crops educator based in the Bay region. And today we have more of an open format on virtual breakfast. And what we'll be doing is like a round robin approach, letting the specialist give kind of a field report or if you don't have that much to share because maybe not much happened due to the heat, then we can pass over. But I'm going to give everyone an opportunity, and then if that fills the half an hour, we'll go ahead and open it up to Jeff to give the weather report, and we'll go into an even more open format where everyone can ask whatever questions you want to. And so today is, like I said, the round robin approach, where we have a lot of our specialists on to go ahead and give updates from the field within their specialties and in general. And then we'll also be able to open up and ask specific questions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so then we can see each other. So if you do have video capabilities and you would like to make this more interactive, you're welcome to turn on that video, but let's get started. Kurt, I'll pick on you first. What's going on?
Lucky number one, huh? Name of the game is probably water, in many cases lack thereof. So lots of nutrient deficiencies showing up in the field. Wheat numbers are pretty much tallied, came in real solid. I think between reds and whites, anywhere between 120 and 140, 145 bushels. So pretty solid, pretty good year for wheat. So we'll have more specifics on that as we get into the fall towards wheat planting season. Big thing showing up probably on corn is N deficiency across the board. It doesn't matter if you're low end, mid end, high end, super high end, it is just deficient. Why? No water, right? I always joke that plants don't grow to water, they grow through water, right? So no water, obviously we get little growth, we don't get nutrients moving through the soil to that plant. So I was out looking at some trials yesterday, anywhere up to 250, 300 plus pounds of N. Everything is just as deficient as down in that 50 to 100 pound range. So unless we get some rain, which hopefully Jeff can answer our question there here in a couple minutes, that doesn't look to be changing anytime soon. A little bit of potassium probably showing up at the same time on corn with some of those N deficiencies. Again, lack of water issue. When you look at soybeans, big thing showing up is potassium deficiency across the board. So in many cases, if you did go out with a maintenance application, it looks like thus far we might be okay. Have some interesting trials out with some pretty low soil test K levels that right up to the treatment line where we applied maintenance application, no deficiency symptoms are showing, and then right beyond that, it's deficient as can be. Some intensely fluorescent yellow soybeans showing up in the field. So a lot of those are K issues. Not much we can do about that at this point in time. Keep in mind with something like soybeans, you're looking at probably about 70-75% of your potassium uptake is done probably here in about another 9-10 days. So really not much we can do. Biggest thing, again, I can say is make sure you get a soil test and look at where that's at going into the fall season. A little bit of sulfur issues showing up here and there on corn, a little bit more sporadic. We have a couple interesting sulfur sidrus timing trials out this year where we have some late season applied sulfur. Actually, even in an N deficient situation, that plant is looking slightly better than where no S was applied at all. We have a couple intensive management trials out this year with a couple other states looking at all sorts of combinations of nutrient factors and fungicide factors across the board. And those are actually looking quite interesting at this point in time. So once we get past tassel, which we see tassels poking across most fields right now, we'll have a better indication as to what is or is not deficient in some of those scenarios. So big thing is we just need water. Been dry as can be the last couple of weeks. Everything's starting to get scorched. So we need a little bit of water to get those plants cranking again.
Kurt, what does potassium deficiency look like in a soybean?
Yep, so you're going to start seeing K deficiency. If you haven't already, you're going to see the firing of the outer edge of that leaf moving inward. You're going to see it start to show up towards the base of that plant and move upwards. So if you don't catch it early, you'll see that entire plant engulfed with those deficiency symptoms. Corn will be something very similar. You'll see that leaf phytotox along that margin, so along the edge of that leaf, starting towards the base of that plant. It's kind of interesting. You'll see probably both N and K deficiency in corn showing up at the same time. So remember, N deficiency will show up towards that mid vein and work middle of that leaf outwards. K will start on the outer edge of that leaf and work its way inwards. Both will show up towards the base of that plant. And if it doesn't get corrected, they slowly work their way up the entire stalk. So those would probably be two big things to keep your eye out for right now.
Yeah. Would a manganese application be worthwhile if there's a lack of water?
If there's a lack of water, probably not. So oftentimes, something like sugar beets, we'll see manganese deficiency show up right now, and most of that is due to how dry it is out there. So there's two forms of manganese, one's reduced, one's oxidized, and they kind of shuttle back and forth. When we get these extreme, I won't say extreme, when we get these drier soil conditions, we tend to migrate towards that oxidized form, which isn't really plant available. Once we get maybe quarter-inch of rain, many times those deficiency symptoms will alleviate themselves and go away with something like sugar beets. Something like soybeans could be a little bit of a different story. We know in those mid to high pH zones, a lot of those manganese deficiency symptoms will not go away. Being how dry it is right now, I probably would stay away from the foliar application. Oftentimes your foliar uptake will be quite poor if those roots are stressed and if they don't have sufficient soil moisture. So if that corrects itself, then I would possibly consider it, and then it'd be a matter of what your growth stage is on the specific plant.
Chris just pointed out that potassium deficient beans are favorable for soybean aphids as well. So there's unfortunately, when the conditions are like this, it's a web of issues, usually just not one, a lot of interaction out in the field. And if there's no other, I don't see any other questions right now, Kurt. So we'll move on to the next one. How does that sound? We're doing some squares this morning. Aaron, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Aaron, we did have a question. Anybody use torch as a replacement for EMS?
I can take the first stab, and then maybe Aaron Hill has done some work on this, but we haven't personally done any work with AMS replacements, like side-by-side comparisons during my time at MSU. I'm not sure. I don't have data from Christy either. Aaron,
yeah, I think she's probably the better person to answer that question, because I don't have any experience with that.
I know we don't have any on like our website or things like that. And I know with AMS replacements, you just need to make sure that you're getting enough actual AMS product to, counterbalance if you're just using a regular AMS product, like 8.5 pounds per 100 gallons. So just like generic glyphosates, you want to make sure you're getting enough actual active ingredient compared to what a non-generic product would be. So I would make sure that when you're looking at those, to do the math to make sure what they're recommending is actually up to that standard. But I can try to look for some resources. I know we don't have any on our website.
It looks like Brooke may have some sense to give here. 2 cents.
Well, we didn't do any replicated trials, but we did test it out a couple of years ago at the Kellogg Biological Station in just, a field here versus a field there. And we didn't notice any visual differences it was termination of cover crops and the speed at which the cover crops were terminated and the quality of termination was the same visually as using AMS. So anecdotal evidence that for us, it worked. as we were expecting it to. So I don't have anything else beyond that. So
Fabulous. All right. Well, Aaron, I'll move back to you. Do you have any other updates from the field? Anything else going on?
Well, one that we've been getting recently, and I know Phil Cates also on the call, is we've discussed this a bunch, is perennial weed control in pastures. So this is when a lot of perennial weeds are starting to flower, which is when many people notice them, which is why we usually get calls. So when you're out scouting your fields, it's great if you do that earlier than when they start to flower, because many of our herbicides are most effective when these perennial weeds are in the bud stage, so before they're blooming. And that's because perennial weeds can be such a problem because they produce vegetatively. So you can kill the top part of the plant and that feels really satisfying, but because they can reproduce vegetatively, they can produce new shoots over and over again over multiple years, and that's why they're problematic. So when they're in that bud stage, before they're flowering, they're sending all that energy also down to that vegetative rhizome structure, and that makes the herbicides move down too, and you get a lot better control. So when we're trying to control those weeds, that's the target. And if you're past that and can potentially do some mowing, but not spread around a bunch of seeds, and then go back in the fall when they produce new rosettes, those are those circular structures of leaves close to the ground, you could do a fall application. And I could also ping Kim on just general pasture health, because lots of times if your forage system isn't very healthy, that's when these weeds invade, and lots of times they don't if you have better conditions.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Aaron, the other Aaron, did you have anything to add about what's going on?
I had one picture I wanted to share, if that's okay. And it's not necessarily something that I can confirm 100% what's going on, but we've seen a couple of times in soybeans, and I've talked to Christy Sprague about this, is this sort of speckling, and it almost is like lesions. And we've seen 2 cases come in reporting this around July 4th was when they first started to see the symptoms. And I think this picture is not very good, but you can see it's a little bit 3-dimensional, and it can't be really explained by any applications that are going on. And so we think that this is actually air pollution issue, ozone levels maybe in particular, but like I said, it's kind of a working theory. We do have a way that we can track ozone levels. So we have looked at that. Both the fields that we've seen this in are sort of near the Grand Rapids area. So I've used the station there. And what it takes is a acute exposure to 100 parts per billion of ozone or more can cause visible symptoms in soybeans. And so we did see that early or late in June. And so that's kind of our theory, is that we're seeing this. And Christy has also seen this in other fields around campus and other places. So it doesn't seem to be something that moves through the plant. It's kind of like a phytotoxicity, but it doesn't add up with what's been applied or not been applied in the field. So I don't know if anyone else has seen this, but it's not widespread. We've only seen 2 cases, but just something I thought I would share our theory about.
Yeah.
Aaron, I've been kind of walking a lot of soybean fields as we're sampling, and I'm seeing that. And back in 2012, during the huge drought, I remember that there was that sort of symptom, and I thought the explanation was ozone, or almost like a, just like the hot, almost like a sun scald sort of thing. And it seemed that was the explanation at that time.
Well, that's good. Then it's kind of consistent.
And not like a weed control issue, not like a herbicide issue.
Right. And what I've read is that high light conditions with high ozone can kind of be a combination factor. I see Jeff shaking his head, so maybe he has something to add here.
I think we have to have data to support this, but ozone is a strange one in Michigan, because much of the problem with ozone that we see in terms of the higher concentrations relates to our neighbors upstream across the lake, and the fact that the ozone is formed in these really hot sunny days, as you mentioned, and it's trapped in the marine boundary layer across the lake, and it ends up in elevated concentrations on the west shore or the eastern shore of Lake Michigan. And that's where we see a lot of the non-attainment for standards and the problems that go on. A lot of them are concentrated in the western part of the state. So it is the time of the year, and it's when we would most likely be seeing issues with ozone. And given the weather that we've had over the last several weeks, it isn't a surprise at all. But we would need to look at some concentration data to try and maybe put some details and dates together.
All right, that's pretty interesting tidbit there, Aaron. So thank you for showing those pictures and for that discussion. I just want to point out there was a question about hemp dogbane in pastures, hemp dogbane in pastures for controlling milkweed, some recommendations, and there was a fact sheet pasted in the chat box. So if you are on your phone, it looks very Googleable as far as being able to find that fact sheet. And so that's a fact sheet about milkweed and hemp dogbane control and what kind of herbicide. With high ozone, would we see a lack of CO2 being a problem for corn plants?
Yeah, I can make a quick comment. I mean, corn is a C4 plant, right? So typically it's not limited by lack of CO2. It's able to shuttle CO2 inside its leaves, right? So being a C4 plant, I wouldn't think corn would be limited by lack of CO2.
Would we had other plants, Manny, that might be?
I mean, C3 plants like soybeans, again, with the increase in CO2 concentration in atmosphere over time, they tend to benefit more than a C4 like corn or sorghum or sugarcane, So in theory, again, the increase in CO2 level does benefit these C3 plants like soybeans. But I don't see increase in changes in ozone. I think that change in concentration might not be, I think, such a limiting factor. But in general, soybeans do benefit with the increase in CO2 over time that we are seeing. But then it's kind of like negated by the increase in temperature at the same time, right?
Yeah. And did you have any updates from the field you'd like to include at this time?
Oh, well, yeah. I think Kurt hit on some of those, what we are seeing out in the field. The one question I have been asked is, again, due to this, lack of moisture, what's the impact on yield? Are we already losing some yield potential? And there's no simple answer to that, but I think I always relate that to the phenological stage, right, where our plants are. And soybeans are more forgiving at this point. I have been looking at our trials. We do multiple planting day trials based on when you planted. Most of the soybeans are already blooming or they are already into pod development, right? So soybeans can pretty much, deal with the lack of moisture early. Vegetative stage, it's not an issue at all. Early reproductive stage, flowering, or even early pod development, they can deal with it. They can abort anywhere from 20 to even up to 80% of flowers and pods and still yield well. So seed filling is really critical, which is approaching here in another week or 10 days. And that's where we want to make sure that we have enough moisture. If someone has the ability to irrigate, around at R3, R4 stages is when it's really critical to have enough moisture for soybeans. For corn, I believe it's, we need it now. So hopefully Jeff has some good comments for us here. We are already testing for the most part silking, and this is the most critical stage, right? Pollination or lack of pollination success is one of the main yield limiting factors. So hopefully we'll get some rain here.
So someone did ask about spider mites, and yes, Chris Stefanzo responded, they are a concern. Chris will actually be on next week. I'm sure she'll be more than willing to field all the questions about that, but she did go ahead and post into the chat box that there are handouts on the entomology's website, Field Crops Entomology, on the msu.edu website for a cheat sheet for miticides and also for a handout on how to rate mite infections in corn and soybeans, so you know about when to treat. And so please view those, but Chris will be on next week. There's also a question about Roundup ready resistant weeds and control of them And Aaron went ahead and pasted in that the weed control guide has recommendations for fall weed control in respect to the concerns of the crops and those troublesome resistant weeds. So please check the weed control guide for field crops E0434, and that is also available on the MSU Extension's website. And so take a look at those. And if you have lingering questions, of course, we'll be here next week. You're also good to contact us individually. There was also a comment about the AMS replacement question. And this individual, Jason, thank you, pointed out that NDSU and Purdue has run some research on the use of them. And so if you want to Google, it looks like Rich Zollinger at NDSU has done a lot of the adjuvant work and kind of see what they have found. But he was kind of bringing up that it looks like, depending on the condition, some of those products may not work as well as other products. So make sure you check into that research. Oh, Chris, you had a comment?
I just have a quick comment. Although I'm on next week, I have a list. If you'd like to email me a question ahead of time, because I'm stupid and I have to look these things up, please do that. But for this week, I know Phil would be very excited if I mentioned potato leafhopper. Now is the sweet spot probably to spray some of these fields, and potato leafhopper does better in dry weather and has some interactions. So you know, if you're at threshold, which in alfalfa, Phil, I don't know what are you like at 6 inches? Most of the alfalfa that you're seeing, maybe he can chime in, but that would be in 100 sweeps, 50 leafhoppers. So 1 leafhopper every other sweep. And once you get to 8 to 12 inches, that's 1 per sweep. And as far as products, you know, any kind of pyrethroid, I'd be more concerned that you got the spray on timely and did it right and got good coverage than, you know, that you drove around looking for a product particularly. In dry beans, I'll mention that it's 1 leafhopper per trifoliate. But dry beans may still have their seed treatment kind of going for them. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's a pretty critical thing. And also looking for your Western bean cutworm egg masses as well.
All right. Thank you, Chris. We have had some flights, but not very high flights with the Western bean cutworm yet. Brooke, you want to go ahead and give an update from the farm and mention the insurance coverage for double crop soybeans?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that the RMA now offers a new program, extended coverage area-wise for double crop soybeans, and it's too late for this year to do that, but it's good to know that you can get a written agreement for double crop soybeans. 40 some counties in Michigan, most of the southern, you know, middle, lower peninsula are eligible. So I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware. I will look up a news article and put that in the chat in case you want to look at that map and direct link.
Great. Thank you, Brooke. And I'm guessing things are dry, but going okay out at the Kellogg Biological Station.
Yeah, we happened to get a couple of small rain events in the last week and a half that made wheat harvest difficult, but also gave us a little bit of extra moisture for corn and soybeans. So things aren't looking terrible in this part of Michigan. And I haven't traveled around much to see further south to see what things are looking like, but generally okay at this point. I will mention, if you're thinking about cover crops after your wheat, I had talked about that a few weeks ago. Now is the time, I guess, to consider, if you're going to put manure down, probably do that before you get to your cover crop planted, just so you don't damage the cover crop seeding. And then think about how you're going to manage volunteer wheat. If you go ahead and plant your cover crop before much of that wheat emerges, you're going to have a lot of it, and maybe that's not a big deal. It kind of depends on whether you want your cover crop to winter kill or not. If you want it to winter kill, you might want to wait until we get a good rain, get some of that wheat flushed, and then kill it, and then plant your cover crop to not have to deal with that.
All right. Thank you, Brooke. I'm just going to go ahead. We have some more questions popping in. There's been some questions about Septoria brown spot symptoms and that ozone damage. I'm going to try to finish with Kim and Daniel, let them give them updates, and then we can kind of dive into some more of these questions, and I'll repeat them out loud. So Kim, what are you seeing out in the fields?
Well, it's dry out there in a lot of the state. First cutting hay was pretty good, but the regrowth is slow. Alfalfa is doing better than our grasses are. Most of our cool season grasses used for hay or haylage in Michigan will shut down when it gets dry and hot and just wait for better weather. And that's kind of where they're at right now. So we could use a good rain across a lot of the state. The good news is it's really good haymaking weather if you need to do that. And the potato leafhoppers are here. So one thing that you don't want to do is give your crop a double whammy of stress. So if it's already being stressed by dry weather, don't let the bugs get in there and beat it down some more. Be proactive on your scouting and get those under control. I see Chris nodding her head, so she may have something to add to that. And that's about all I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you for keeping it short and sweet, Kim. I appreciate that. And Daniel, how's it going with the beets?
Well, really, it's a lot of the same old story. It's awfully dry out there, and you can see a lot of the beet fields wilting down and they're being impacted by it. But the kind of the nice thing with sugar beets is that since we don't have a critical flowering time, they can just kind of hang on and wait for rain. So that's kind of where we're at. We're losing some of that growth potential because, they don't have the water to be growing now, but it's not like, we're right at flowering or anything that's really going to impact the final yield yet at this point. So when we do get those drains, they can go back to growing. One thing that's kind of interesting is that it is Cercospora leaf spot time. So a lot of growers are getting their fungicide applications on. And with it being so dry, I wouldn't expect to see a whole lot of development of Cercospora. But I found it in a couple fields so far this week and then one field last week. So if you have high humidity or heavy dews in the morning, or if you happen to catch one of these 10th or half-10th rains, that can be conducive for it yet, even if the plant is still suffering from some of that dry weather. So be sure if you're going to get some of those rains, or if there's a chance for it, or if you're getting those heavy dews or high humidity, you want to still have your fungicides applied. So
fabulous. Thank you, Daniel. And then I did miss Lyndon Kelly. I didn't see you on the list. Lyndon, are you able to unmute yourself and give any irrigation tips? I see you did paste in. There's 2 links for people who can only hear. And there's a basic checkbook for irrigation scheduling. It is on the website as well, called Soil Water Balance Sheet. And there's also irrigation scheduling tools, and then an irrigation planning. And of course, if you are unable to access those, if you email Lyndon, and I'm sure he would be so happy to share those with you as well.
Thanks, Monica.
Yeah.
So Dr. Dong's on the way to a blueberry harvest plot, so I'm trying to cover. We put our email addresses for both myself, Lyndon Kelly, and Dr. Youngsuk Dong, our irrigation specialist, at the top. When we talked about it yesterday, we thought keeping up is the big issue as far as irrigation scheduling. That's why we put the irrigation scheduling links in there. When Dr. Andreessen says that we have a potential ET of 1.4 inches, we need to add 120% at these critical stages. So that means our crops, if you have irrigation, we'd like to see 1.5 inches to 1.75 inches this week. So that's sort of a target that's on there. A few questions this about one more shot of nitrogen with the high prices and sort of nitrogen stabilizing here, or maybe some deals on nitrogen. We have some people talking about watering in ammonium sulfide or urea, or putting it through as fertigation. So we've been talking a little bit about that. There's information on the website to help you with that. And last but not least, dry weather brings around interest in irrigation. It is too late to make good investments this year. It's just terribly high prices right now, and it's hard to get everything put together, but it's the exact great time to talk about next year. The lowest price in irrigation equipment happens during August and September. If you're thinking you don't want to go through this again without irrigation, then now's the time to be doing some homework. A good starting point is that fact sheet on irrigation planning. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lyndon. I'm going to see real quick. Oh, Marisol, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, just couldn't get to my mute button fast enough. just like everybody has been talking about about dry weather, nematodes are also affected by dry conditions. They actually favor, especially nematodes such as soybean cyst nematode, sugar beet cyst nematode, northern root knot nematode. They do very well in in dry conditions. In years that have been wet, rainy years, nematode numbers are really low, and some of my field trials really have failed because their numbers are not high enough for me to see damage and to see, the differences between different methods of control. But the years that are very dry, then nematode numbers will be very much higher, in part because nematodes are susceptible to fungal pathogens in the soil when soil is more moist, and and a couple of other reasons. But I would recommend, especially in the fall, that you submit a sample to the plant diagnostic lab if you do not know if you have certain nematodes, things like soybean cyst nematode, sugar beet cyst nematode. If you do have high numbers, it is good to take action. For soybean cyst nematode, one of the most important actions, if you don't have it, is to not get it. And one of the ways to do this is by, if you're going to share machinery, or if you're going to use machinery in several fields, and you go from infested field to a clean field, to clean your machinery, to wash it. If you wash the soil, you washed most of the nematodes. But also rotating sources of resistance. The most common source of resistance for soybean cyst nematode is P8878. We found significant reduction in nematode numbers and also increased yields when you rotate sources of resistance. So far, the most common commercially sources of resistance is Peking and P8878, but there are some new ones in the pipeline from different companies, and also rotating with non-host, things like corn, wheat, or pretty much anything else that is not soybeans. Or dry beans are also a very good host for soybean cyst nematode. For sugar beet, similar things, rotation, and selecting varieties that are either tolerant or resistant. There are a couple nematicides that work better than others. None of them will solve your problem, absolutely. So you want to do a combination also of some cultural practices such as rotation, and using resistant varieties. And I think that's it for today.
All right. Thank you, Marisol. All right. With the remaining time, I'm going to try to move through these questions as fast as possible. So please bear with me. Effects of fungicide on drought-stricken corn. Is there a threshold to where it doesn't make sense to spray? Unfortunately, Marty Chilvers is not on today. So some of these pathology questions, I'm going to see if anyone else can answer them. And people, please also give comments like tar spot. For my area, the tar spot finding is quite low as far as scouting goes, and that's the Bay Area. I even talked with someone who was out in fields that are irrigated, and those incidences are still not very high. So, but if other people have seen tar spot for your region, please comment. Otherwise, I don't know if Manny or someone else has a comment on effects of fungicide on drought-stricken corn, but we may have to hold that question. I apologize, and ask Marty at a different time. Manny, do you got anything?
Yeah, I think Marty would be the best person. Just with lack of moisture, again, I think we are seeing probably lower incidence of diseases, right? So just keeping that in mind. And again, some of the growth potential is restricted, like in soybean. We are seeing little less canopy development because of lack of moisture, right? So something to think about as you're thinking about fungicide application.
For sure. Has anyone else had any tar spot reports in their area? All right. Well, I think that's your answer. It's pretty quiet. So Scout, maybe you can save some money, right? It sounds like you might just spend it somewhere else, possibly buying irrigation equipment later, but scout your fields and let's just, that can you determine your thresholds for application. So let's move on. It looks like we're still getting some questions about that ozone damage, differing from Septoria brown spot. Erin, I can read what you put in here, or if you want to summarize it like faster
Sure.
than that.
Yeah, I can tell you quickly. Number one, I'm not a pathologist, but we do have several qualified pathologists here who looked at these and said, no, it's not a disease, but they would be looking for fungal structures, right? And also that link I posted, Septoria leaf spot seems to turn tan in the center as it progresses, and you would expect a disease to continue to progress through the rest of the plant. We're not seeing that here. It looks more like a kind of one and done, let's say, like you would see with a phytotoxicity where it has this contact type damage, but here it's more lesion looking than it does with phytotoxicity.
Mm-hmm. And has anyone seen frog eye in soybeans with this dry weather? And I will say, like, apparently Marty shouldn't take vacations because we're getting a lot of questions for him right now, but we're trying. So I'm sorry if we're not able to, I'm sure he'll be back next week. So, Brooke,
one quick comment, Monica. I mean, again, I think on soybeans, we tend to see a lot of this, what I will call like a cosmetic damage, right? So even these ozone symptoms, you know, again, Septoria at low levels probably is, again, doesn't have as much of a yield impact. So again, keep those in mind. We do develop a lot of leaf area in soybeans, right? So generally, again, that's not our real limitation. So just think about, I mean, you need that good canopy in the upper layer of soybeans. And some of these symptoms tend to show up towards the bottom, which is sort of shaded out anyways. So just keep that in mind.
Okay. Brooke, did you have a comment there?
Not related to that, but I did think of one other thing to bring up, if I might.
Yeah.
Eric Anderson and I have been working or talking about vole damage in soybeans, which is pretty bad in some areas of no-till planted soybeans this year. And which is something that some of you on this call might also be dealing with. So I just want to bring that up. We see it at the station, and I'm curious to work more on figuring out if there's a solution. There's really not a great solution published in the literature, you know, the recommendations anywhere. So if anybody has any other advice here on that topic, feel free to throw it out.
Okay.
Cats, a lot of cats.
A lot of cats. Okay. That sounds like that could be a problem also. But, I also wanted to mention there was one question I missed about any estimate of impact of volunteer corn on soybean yield for those deciding whether the addition of a grass herbicide is worth it. Any go-to studies that have been done. And there was a handout shared from Penn State University covering kind of decision-making on what to do with that volunteer corn. Unless there's any other specific comments about how to control that. That is the last question. And I did it right at 8 o'clock. So I'm gonna go ahead and give myself a pat on the back. And we have survived another Q&A session of hot topics. So, of course, next week we will have an insect update with Chris Defonso. If you need to review any of these questions or resources, it's both shared live onto Facebook, and it's also offered as a podcast on, we post both the Spotify and the iPhone offering of the podcast, and you can view it on our webpage as well, the Field Crops Team Extensions webpage. So many offerings if you would like to look back, or if you heard something cool and you want to share with your friend, that's where you can get those shareable links. With that, I don't see anything for you, Brooke. Maybe next week someone else will mention something, but it was another fun virtual breakfast, and thank you for attending. Have a wonderful day.